Hello. I think we're getting everybody's joining here. Y'all don't have to be on video, but I love it. So don't be shy. Don't be shy. We don't need to be the only ones who are visible here. Exciting. Hi. Hi. So if you don't mind, it would be great if you guys want to just like type your first name in and like where you live, where you are, like anything you want to share. Like, this is where I live. This is where I'm looking for a house. I would like to have a house upstate. If you feel like it, if you feel comfortable with that, just so that way you can be a little bit more, interactive here. So welcome. I can't even see the chat box. It's fine. No, wait, now I can. Now I can. I see it. Here, I'm typing it so everybody sees it. Here. Yeah, so welcome to our first, we're going to be doing this every Thursday at 1:00. One or more of us from the team will be here to talk about, I think we have about 25 or 30 topics already ready to go. So we have a lot of different things happening. And there we go. Oh, good. I'm seeing some things here. And I'm just going to turn my notifications on. There we go. Do not disturb. So I'm Megan Brenwhite. I'm the head of the Upstate real estate team. You guys probably found out about this through our email newsletter or through Instagram. And so this is Billy Golan, who is...
I'm Billy Golan. I'm a buyer's agent with the team. And yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so we thought that like we just were kind of, having a lot of the same conversations with a lot of people again and again and again and again. And we have a lot of people who are on the waiting list to work with as buyers agents. And, the market is shifting so quickly, almost week by week at this point, that we just thought like, if we had a forum where we could just talk about these things, build up a little library, then you all would enter this frenzy a little bit better informed and better prepared, and we'd be able to help you in a different way. So I guess I should just start for like 2 seconds and just explain how our team works, because that may not be obvious. So we are part of Keller Williams Hudson Valley North. We're not a brokerage, and the team is myself, and then Jen Brown, who I see here is in the background there. Jen is our chief of staff. We're sort of like I'm like the CEO and she's like the COO essentially. And then we have a listings team and a buyer's team. And then we have admins that support both sides of that. So we're around 12 people now. And the reason we do that is partially, as we go over the process, the timeline for how to buy a house, you'll understand why it makes sense to have different people do different bits of this process, because there's like, some people are great at like finding awesome houses. Some people are great at negotiating it. Some people are great at like just like checking in weekly with the banks and with the like attorneys and with the other agent to see like what's going on. And most people
takes a village.
It takes a village, right? So one of the things that sucks about being a real estate agent is that a normal real estate agent who's working on their own has to do the whole process from start to finish. And so you're like always doing some stuff that you kind of hate or are not good at. So our goal with the team is that everybody that people are working with are doing things that they like most of the time and are good at, and that we can develop those processes. So, yeah, it does take a little bit of a village, and the village includes it's not just us, it's also the bank, the attorney, the inspector, the septic inspector, the additional electric guy, all those things. So, so I think that the reason that we had that, so Billy basically focuses 100% on buyers. And I guess it makes sense to say that up here, there's a multiple listing service, so that if someone's working with Billy or another buyer's agent on the team, that is getting paid by the seller's commission to the seller's agent. So the buyer doesn't pay anything extra. That comes out of something that's already been set up in advance in the multiple listing service. So Billy can show any house in the multiple listing service I can show any house in the multiple listing service. As a buyer working with a buyer's agent, you don't pay them anything. It comes out of the seller side. So to me, it always makes sense to work with a buyer's agent. And I guess the other thing I would say is that we also do a fair amount of dual agency with our team because of the way that we have such a big reach. And dual agency would mean you guys look at one of those awesome houses we post on Instagram and say, that's the one, I want that one. Then we actually technically don't represent either side anymore. We don't have a fiduciary duty to either side. We kind of coordinate the transaction. Practically speaking, it's almost exactly the same. We just are extra careful, and we can't advise either side on specific price, or if we give comps to one side, we have to give those comps to the other side. But practically speaking, it's kind of the same. But even on our team, like if you look at a listing, I would be the one, or Danny would be the one to communicate primarily with the listing agent. The seller, and Billy would be the one working with the buyer to kind of hold her hand through that process, exactly the same way we do if it's not one of our listings, right? Is that
A little
fair to
different
say,
than
Billy?
a dual agency when it's just a solo agent and they're kind of talking to both sides. A little bit easier when we do it this way, I think.
And we actually have 2 separate full-time transaction coordinators on both sides also, so that Kay is working on the listing side to make sure that whole side is going smoothly, and John is working on the buyer side to make sure that's going smoothly. So I guess that to get to our topic for today, so that's our framework and our context for how we work. The answer, the timeline, the process for buying a house is probably longer than you think or would want. It's the short answer. And it's definitely longer than in a lot of places around the country. It's definitely longer than, it's not necessarily longer than in New York City, where a lot of people, come from. But if you have to go through a process like with a co-op, a board approval or something like that, that is about the same. But we're seeing right now, it's about 3 months from an accepted offer to closing if you're getting financing, and roughly 2 months if you're paying cash. So that's those are pretty, I think that's pretty much what happens. And Billy, when you submit an offer, that's what you put down as the targeted closing date pretty much, right?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think that's with no issues arising or unexpected turn of events. That's sort of the standard, but there are always exceptions, and sometimes things will pop up to delay it. But that's why I think we encourage, on a whole, people to kind of do everything as quickly and as swiftly as they can, because that way, if things do pop up, you're at least ahead of the game, or you're not holding it up on your own end.
Yeah, you've bought a little time before the other inevitable problems come up. So, the first start of the timeline is searching for a house. So this is this right now is it's challenging. It used to be that we could work with buyers and say there were buyers where it took several months to find a place. That's always been real. But we could, if somebody was we want to find a house, we have the budget, we are pre-qualified, we're ready to go. We could find a house in a weekend. We really could. That was you could be we're going to book 15 houses. Let's find something, and maybe 2 weekends. So that part of the timeline, I would say, is much longer now, because essentially what's happening is there are fewer houses on the market. They're going more quickly. You're more likely to encounter a multiple offer situation where you might not be the one to win. So you have there's a bunch of steps to get to before you even get to the accepted offer. And that's, we have a Slack channel for our team that's called Houses We Should Sell. And we just are constantly looking, and we work across about 6 counties, by the way. So that's other context, so we work in Ulster, Dutchess, Putnam, Sullivan, Columbia, Greene, also some Delaware, Schoharie, Orange. So, because we know that we have got to do a pretty broad search to find these awesome houses for people that are, priced okay and don't have some hideous problems. So,
And that's sort of the beauty of Upstate. There are so many different areas that for different people, and like some people are going to gravitate towards one county or another. And, even within all of that we just mentioned, most of the time it's still within, 2 hours, 2.5 hours max from the city, which is great.
Yeah. And there really are there are a lot of great places that you could end up. And that's true. So, that just is factually true. Like, it would make our jobs easier if we thought there weren't. And we were like, everybody has to look within this one little area, but it's not. We know we have clients who live all over the place and totally love it. So I think that one of the things I would say that can shorten up that part of the timeline is be ready. We only really work with buyers who have the pre-qualification ready or pre-approval from a bank. And we would strongly recommend a local bank up here, which we can give you referrals to. Sellers prefer that a ton. The appraisal, which is one of the parts of the process that is right now taking way too long, like months and months. That is something that local banks have a real leg up on. The national banks seem to be having a hard time getting the few appraisers that are up here to kind of take their jobs. So yeah, we're seeing people switching midway sometimes to local banks. So yeah, I think we can, if you guys have if you have a question, if you want to have the question about the banks, if you could write to info@upstate-real estate, or else, Jen, I don't know if you want to put in the chat, our normal list of recommendations, or we could email to everybody who came. That's also fine. We don't get kickbacks from the banks. These are just people that we work with, who we know get the job done. So, so you be ready, and then you be ready to move. If you see a house that you and then just come, literally come up that day, come up before the weekend, come up as quickly as you can, even if there's only one house. Because if you like that house, it's just this is not the kind of market where you can wait to be we're going to wait to look at things so we can see 6 things, right, Billy? I mean, we've been talking a lot about that.
And sometimes we find that a house has sat on the market for a few weeks, maybe. And then, you kind of let your guard down and think, okay, I have time to wait on that one or decide. But then all of a sudden, inevitably, all of a sudden there's a bunch of interest. And now, you saw it was there for 3 weeks. You finally get there, and now there's 2 other offers on it. It's just all the more reason why when you find the right thing, you want to be prepared to act on it.
And that's always been true, by the way. So this thing about a house could sit on the market for 9 months and then all of a sudden have 2 offers, that just has always been one of these weird real estate things that happens. And I think it's, we've talked about this in our team meetings. I think it is because something else shifted in the market, 5 houses in that price range all went pending. So all of a sudden this house kind of rose to the surface.
Right.
There has to be some reason, because it happens enough that it's just weird.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing I would say is to really be realistic, is to, understand that prices really have gone up dramatically since last year. And that is real. When you see things that, if you're looking on Zillow or on realtor.com, you're often, if you see the for sale price, that may not be the price that it's closed at yet. So you might think this could be this house was 540. So that's great. So I'm going to see another house of 540 around that, but that house could have sold for 750.
Right. So when Zillow has the price and it's not closed yet, but it's pending or has in a contract, it's still showing what that asking price was. So it's saying 400 pending, and it's okay, that's off the market, but it didn't close at that price. And we won't know the actual price if it's not one of our houses until it actually closes. And as we know, very often, really the majority of the time, it's above that asking price.
Right. So it's 3 months later. So again, keep in mind that what you're looking at in a quickly rising market is this, when you see Zillow and Zillow pricing, as a snapshot of especially if it's pending, it's under contract, it's something that happened 3 months ago. So you don't even know the price, and prices are going up. So it's both things are happening. So we also are telling people to, advising people to look at houses that are about like kind of look at houses that are around 20% under the top of your budget, because then you come in like the baller into the multiple offer situation and you're like, you're ready to go, you're ready to rock and roll, you know. If you look at houses, it used to be that we would like, if someone's budget was 400, we would look up to like 475. And now if your budget is 400, we might look up to 400, but 400 is kind of the mental equivalent of 475 now. Because if it's a good house, it probably will go significantly over.
I think to an extent, it depends on the price range. I think at some of the lower price ranges, there's a little more competition, and then it tends to go a higher percentage above asking. And, you know, there's always exceptions. You know, sometimes there are houses that go for the asking or even slightly under, but they tend to be in a little bit of a higher price point, or, you know, for the most part, maybe there's something about it that's keeping others from wanting it, whether it's work being needed or maybe it's in a certain location or something.
So that's like, yeah. So, and those are the houses that we want to look for, right? The houses that have like not such good pictures, or like maybe it needs some work, or like there's some reason why it hasn't just come out and like immediately sold. So the way to shorten the time of looking is to, you know, be prepared, be realistic. I think that, and I would also say to some extent, be open. So if you're looking at a house and you go, this looks a little meh, but we like, if we or another agent are like, hey, I think this could be really cool. It's on a great location. It's amazing. I would try, I really believe that prices are going to go up more and pretty significantly based on the number of people who are going to be able to work remotely from New York City and from all over the place. There's only around 2,000 homes, for example, per year sold in Ulster County, which is one of the biggest counties we work in. Of those houses, our clients would probably have been wanted to see maybe 350, 400. It's not like the majority of them, you know? So that takes like 100 more people coming into the market can totally distort that market of homes that are sort of stylish or not on a big road or not whatever. So I think the prices are going to go up. So my personal advice would be to buy something now that's good enough. And then if you love it and it's great, maybe it ends up really being good enough, or you can change it a little bit so it's amazing. And if you don't like it, then you have something that's in line with the market. If the market goes down, doesn't matter. You can sell your house at a lower price and buy at a lower price. But if it goes up, you're also protected against that.
And a lot of times clients, you know, do say that they're willing to do a little bit of work on a house. You know, most people don't want a total fixer upper or total renovation, but are willing to do little updates here or there. And I think a lot of times the houses we sell are these updated versions. And one of the things that I do and we do as buyers agents is try to help people sort of see the vision as like, you know what, this is a before version of that awesome house. You can turn it into that thing with little tweaks.
And that goes, I mean, God, there's a lot of good questions here that I think we're going to get to at different points. But, you know, if you're looking to sell your home and buy another home in the same area, like what I would say is that the same advice is sort of true, which is that like, look for a house that needs some cosmetic updates, look for a house that like has some bad photos or something, you know, that looks like it has potential, be a little bit open to things. And that's where I think there still is value to be found. And yeah, so for us, for buyers who work with us, and I know we actually have over 300 people on the waiting list right now, which sucks. And we're trying to get more agents and we're trying to find people houses, but we really are trying to get through that. But more people keep joining the list. But for people who work with us and our team, we have essentially a full-time concierge who can help find the contractors, the painters, everything like that in the different areas that we work in, because it's really specific to the local area. So if we go back to the timeline, so first part of it is finding a house. So like, let's say, so Billy, what would you advise a client if they said to you, we love this house, we'd like a few days to think about it?
Well, I mean, maybe if it's a Monday, you got a day or two to think, but I really think it's in a client's best interest to sort of do a little more of that thinking before you even get there. Right? It's like you kind of fall in love, do the research about the area, do the research about the house. And then when you get there, some questions will arise. let's get those questions, sort of in a list, and then we can give that to the listing agent. But I really just think sooner the better. Wait a day at most, and you want to get in there before there are other offers, because if your offer is in there and then someone else had the same offer, well, if you got yours accepted first, then you would have won out for that same amount. And if someone came with the same amount, you would then need to go above that to beat that, and I think, it's not the kind of market either where, you want to keep a poker face and, well, I don't know if I really like this one, but we'll see. Like when you do like it, it's like, we're very transparent with the other agent on the other side. It's like, if a client loves the house, we want to tell them that. And I think that it actually, in a competitive market, it helps when a seller has the feeling that the buyer really does love the house, and is ready to act quickly. Like they saw it, they loved it. Here's their offer. They're serious,
I think that's a really good, so once you get to the stage where you're putting in an offer, then we're talking about the timeline also impacting how the seller perceives you, right? So that's another thing that's kind of interesting, is that so if you go there and you wait 4 days and then you schedule an inspection for 3 weeks later, and you're sort of you get your inspection report and don't give them feedback for 9 days, the seller is going to be like, what is going on? So, one of the things that we do if we know that there's a competitive situation is sometimes we'll even have the inspection booked in advance. If we know you're going into a house that's there's going to be a multiple offer situation, be like, here's our offer and we've got so-and-so booked on Tuesday, ready to go if our offer is accepted.
Yeah, because we're talking a lot about timeline, and I think that it's important to kind of note, although I'm working on the buyer side, I'm very conscious of a lot of the things that go on with the seller side, working with the team, and the sellers it's very important. It's one of the important things to a seller most of the time, that a buyer is going to move through the process as quickly as possible without delay.
And as smoothly as possible. And I think even just being organized and being able to move through those steps quickly shows that you really want the house, that you're serious, you're going to be I'll get the deal done. Because on the seller side, we look at things and we evaluate the price and we evaluate the likelihood to get to the closing table. Those are really the two things.
And what are some of the things you think that are playing into that likelihood to get to the closing table?
Well, one of the things, and this goes to timeline, is so cash versus financing. So right now we are in a market where there are a lot of cash buyers, people who've shifted away from buying in other places, who are able to take what was a down payment for somewhere much more expensive and buy a place cash here. That, because you don't have the appraisal, and so the appraisals are really taking weeks right now, that can shorten the timeline from 3 months to 2 months. It could even be quicker than that. So if you have someone who can order the title search, and we'll go through so it's basically the offer is accepted, that's where we're at right now. The next step is the inspection, so one of the things the reason sellers like it is that it's less risk, particularly in an environment with the pandemic and the economy. So it's it's quicker, but it's also if somebody loses their job, the deal's still going through. But I really do think that seeming sellers are not oh, I want a dummy buyer who's not going to expect anything. They just want to know that people are going to be easy to deal with and the deal is going to go through. And that's really what they're I think it's good to keep in mind that everybody's feelers are out. And right now in the world, our feelers are out anyways, right? Everybody is a little extra stressed and anxious and emotional, and you're in this market and you don't know. And even the sellers don't know, could I get more money if I put it on in spring? Could I get more money if I waited a week? Did we list it too low? Is that why we got offers? Emotions are just heightened. So the more you can do as a buyer to just be look how easy it is with us. Easy peasy, while making sure just that you get the things that are important to you, and that the things that you're important to are taken care of. Basically, when the offer is accepted, generally here you have a 10-day period in which to get the inspection done. So that is the rough period of time that you have the inspection. Obviously, better to get it done sooner rather than later. We, when we're working with people, we have a number of inspectors that we have a small handful, not really a huge number, because we keep refining of inspectors that we like and trust and know will do a very thorough job and we'll also communicate to the clients in a very like calm way. And if you have another 10,000 questions about septic systems that they're just going to keep answering, as many times as you need. And then I like to, in terms of timeline, I like to give the other agent feedback the same day of the inspection. In a perfect world, I think it would be great to be able to say, hey, we're waiting for the report. It's going to come in a couple of days. Wanted to give you a heads up that there's like nothing major was found, but we're going to go over a couple of requests. Or, hey, heads up, like they did find mold in the basement. So we are going to ask them to remediate that. But, overall, it looked pretty good.
And I think it's important to talk about like why it is so important to get the inspection like quicker, and why wait, what's the difference between waiting a day or two versus waiting the full 10 days. But as we know, it is in our client's best interest to have that inspection take place sooner rather than later for a variety of reasons.
Right. And the primary reason is that the attorneys won't start working on the contract until after the post-inspection negotiations are done. So you have the accepted offer, 10 days to do the inspection. You go back and forth. You might have to bring in some other secondary inspector, like a mold assessment or a structural engineer. Like none of this means like you're like buying a dog of a house. Like everybody's just evaluating what would be the cost to fix something and how necessary is it to fix it. So, and usually if you have to get a secondary one, the sellers will generally allow you to go beyond that initial 10-day period. After we say, hey, attorneys, guess what? We have a deal. This is now the price. Like it was $450. We negotiate, like after inspection, they said, whatever, the roof was older than they thought, about to die. So the new price is $430. And the sellers have agreed to put in a radon mitigation system. So we tell that information to the attorney. The seller's attorney drafts the contract. Weirdly, this is like, I don't know if this is just an Upstate custom, but the seller's attorney seems to draft the contract, send it to the buyer's attorney. They go back and forth. It's mostly boilerplate, but they have different boilerplate, which means that process can take like a week. And then it goes to the buyer to sign. So then the buyer signs it. And this is the first time you as buyers put down money. And it's usually 5 to 10% of the full asking price. This is the contract deposit. So we don't do earnest money up here generally. That's not a thing. So you're putting down money here. And then it goes back to the seller. Now, the weird thing is that 99% of the time, the seller is seeing the contract for the first time after the buyer has signed it. So usually the seller's attorney doesn't go over it with the seller beforehand, mostly because it's pretty boilerplate-y. So they sign it, and then you have what's called a fully executed contract. At that point, that's when you're locked in. Up until that point, there aren't a ton of ways that sellers can get out of the contract, but out of the accepted offer, but there are some. So it's in a market that is a strong seller's market, one of the important things, I think this is sort of what your point was with the question, is to get to contract as quickly as possible.
Right.
Because I would say 3 weeks, 3 weeks is really, 3 weeks would be like a relatively quick time frame from accepted offer to contract, because you have the 10 days-ish of like inspection, post-inspection negotiations, then a week to 2 weeks of the attorneys drafting the contract, signing, you're sending the check in, then the seller sign it, and then it gets sent back to the buyer's attorney.
And unfortunately, it is possible that during that time before the contracts are signed, someone else could come see the house, looking at the house as a backup offer. And if they just fall in love with it, they could put in a crazy offer and actually, get the sellers to kind of change their minds. And it's not common, it's not all the time, but it could happen, which is why it's important to have a strong offer in place, even if there aren't necessarily multiple offers on the table. You want to have an offer that's good enough where the person isn't thinking, gosh, maybe I could have gotten something else or something better. And, once you have that inspection take place, that's sort of the first little thing that's helping you lock it in. And then the contract is really, now you feel like you're on solid ground, and then it would really be hard for them to back out at that point.
Well, and there's an initial window. usually most offers have something in them called the attorney review period, and that's 3 business days. So if the offer you put in says there's an attorney review period of 3 days, that is the easiest time for we can't give legal advice, right? So this would be an attorney, you'd have to talk to an attorney. But what I've seen in my experience is that during those 3 days, that is the easiest time for a seller to get out of their existing accepted offer, because they don't have to really do anything. Like afterwards, they don't seem to have to do anything. Again, not an attorney, can't give legal advice, but all I know is that we all breathe a sigh of relief when everybody's under contract. That's the reality. And so I think Billy's point is a good one, which is that like, this is a market where as buyers, you just want to keep making the sellers happy. You want them to like, be like, oh, great, they were so sensible at inspection. Oh, great, they were so sensible here. And all that means, again, it doesn't mean like you got to do stuff you don't want to do, pay something you don't want to pay. Not at all. All it means is that it's just like, we were talking about this the other day, is like, keep asking yourself, like, is this a deal breaker for me? So if you're like, the inspector says that like the chimney cap needs to be replaced and it's like a $200 replacement, just be like, okay, is that a deal breaker for me? If this house had cost $200 more, would I have bought it? If you would have bought it anyways, like maybe just don't ask for that thing that's going to be a major pain in the butt. You know, just like keep it easy. You want to build goodwill, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's because that's the best way for you as a buyer to be successful in a competitive market, right? So like, that's still the thing. It's still about, like, from my perspective as a buyer's agent, I'm still trying to do like what's best for the buyer. And what's best for them is making the seller happy so that they can like get the house. And that's
and I would even argue that even after you're under contract, it's still good to try it, like for both sides, to try and be amicable, but the buyer actually needs it a little bit more. And the reason is that the seller, like, we will ask sellers for a very long list of all of their like people, like the snowplow guy, the handyman, the chimney guy, or whatever. And often people are like, oh, are you leaving that like built-in shelf? Like there's little things that the buyers tend to need from the sellers, or that where it would be better. So like being jerks to sellers through your agent, you're not going to talk to them directly, is not a good way to start things in a small town area. And being like really sensible, they can really open the door to be like, oh, let me introduce you to our neighbors who would watch our cat, and let me do this and let me do that. Like we've seen sellers and buyers, I don't know, like really, really work together in a way that's, and also in case something else comes up, like there's a title issue or something, you really feel like you're all tackling it together instead of an adversarial position.
right. Because everyone really wants the same thing, right? If we're signing a contract, if someone's accepting an offer, they're saying, I want to sell my house to you. You're saying, I want to buy your house. We on both sides as agents want to make both sides happy. And it's like, that's sort of just good practice, basically.
And that's why for us, dual agency doesn't feel that different, because like we really know that like unless both sides are happy, the stuff doesn't move forward anyways, right? So it's like that's kind of things. Oh, what point in the process do you settle things like, are you leaving X in place? So that's great. So ideally, that would be in the offer, right? So ideally, you would say like, there's a section in every offer that says non-real estate items. And that's where we list out things that are in the multiple listing service, like the refrigerator, the stove, the whatever. You can assume that anything that's attached would stay. So actually built-in shelving is probably a bad example, because you could assume that would stay. But it doesn't hurt if there's some special built-in shelving that you really love, like then I would tell the buyer's agent, hey, can you make sure to put that in so there's no question. That same thing's true if there's like a hot tub, you know what I mean? Like that's one that's sometimes a little bit questionable. Right now, we're actually seeing a lot of people wanting to buy homes furnished or partially furnished. And that's one of the more complicated things about when to talk about that. In a perfect world, we would wait till after contract, so people don't get into a big fight about the price of a sofa when they're trying to come to terms about the house.
You don't want that to come between a deal, you know?
Yeah, but sometimes people do talk about it in advance if the seller's like leaving the state or whatever, and they're just like, I don't want this furniture, so this is how much I would sell it all for. We will sort of, that's a separate side deal. We're not involved, but like we will kind of help to facilitate that stuff. But I would say in general, anything anybody wants on either side, it's best to discuss in the offer stage. So like if you're like, you know what, we can't really close. I see that we have like, just according to the normal timeline, we would close January 15th, but we're going to be like out of the country for a month. Like, can we just target the closing date till February? Like, that's great. Like, let's have that discussion at the beginning. Almost anybody can handle anything as long as it's discussed and they don't feel like stuff's getting like snuck in at the last minute. So you've done the inspection. We've presented the request to the inspector, other agent. We've negotiated. The seller's attorney's done the contract. The buyer's attorney has gotten the buyers to sign the contract. The sellers to sign the contract. Fully executed contract. So Billy, now you want to talk about the two, title and financing?
Yeah. So,
or one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even before you get to the signed contract, you want to start taking steps towards securing the loan if you're financing, and having your attorney, get a title check and make sure that the title is clean. So even at the beginning of the process, like, that's part of it, is like requesting the attorney to do that, requesting the bank. And I think a big part of it, and you mentioned this earlier, when it comes to like securing the financing and then eventually the appraisal, is, like, we always kind of recommend that it is best to work with a local bank. Obviously, it's everyone's choice, and sometimes, for one reason or another, it won't make sense. But for the most part, it will be a very good idea to work with a local lender, because things just move a little bit quicker. They're much more capable of securing an appraiser, which we're seeing a lot of delay with national banks being able to get someone in to come and appraise it, because they have to hire, a third party that's appraising the house. So it seems that the appraisers are prioritizing the local banks. So that's a big part of it too. And, once that's the next big kind of anxiety inducing part of the process, is, waiting on an appraisal and then, sort of getting that back, because that number and like what they determine it is going to play a big role in the whole transaction and the deal.
And that's actually, so the appraisal, somebody asked about that. Somebody asked about that earlier, like, are appraisals keeping up? And I think that the answer is not always, and that they're very random right now. And so different appraisers have a different approaches to this market. And I talked to an appraiser this week who was like, well, I think we could characterize this market as stable. And I was like, there are 63% more contracts and 30% less inventory in Ulster County. No one would count that as stable. That's a rising market. Like, that would be totally ignoring the data. So, and this is the problem also with the national banks, is that they're trying to get any appraiser in. And so they get people from like way out of the area who don't understand the area, who don't understand what things make a home special, not just the numbers. And there's some art to this as well. And so we are seeing also, again, it's kind of random, but sometimes those appraisers are appraising things lower than the ones that are used to working with the local banks in the local area. The appraiser is always totally arm's length. Like, we don't, the bank can't like talk to them or influence them. But it does make a difference, I think, if you can work with good ones versus less good ones. And basically at this point, when you have the signed contract, the title process and the appraisal process kind of go side by side. One is to get the financing, and the other is to make sure that you like own the house, and that like the sellers don't like, they're whatever, like they don't really own it, or like, yeah, they have a lien on it.
A contractor or something like that, or there's another person in their family that's on the deed that's not aware of this.
Or there's during the title search, they also do municipal searches. So they also will look for open building violations, or building violations, open building permits. So they'll look for a bunch of different things to see, so that's like, you're trying to get clear title. That is so you get title insurance. Title insurance means that like, if they find out later that someone's uncle actually owned it, the title insurance company is going to be like, whoops, we messed up. We did the title search. We thought the seller owned it. So we're going to cover that for you. And the title insurance, I mean, every attorney is, even if you're paying cash, will say that you pretty much have to do that, but it is a requirement for a mortgage. On the appraisal side, like there's other stuff that goes on with the mortgage, but the appraisal is the one thing that you have a harder time controlling. The time, you can't control the appraisal at all, really, anyways. But what Billy said, I think is really important, is that like some banks will wait to order the appraisal until you have a fully executed contract. But we advise our clients, as soon as you know that the post-inspection negotiations are fine, ask your bank to order that appraisal. It's like a $300 risk. I don't know why banks make such a big deal about this. Like, it's like, once you have those terms, I've never seen a contract fall apart between the two boilerplate. You know what I mean? Like, they're just talking about like memorializing the things. Things can fall apart at inspection, but not usually between inspection. We all came to terms and now they just have to write it up. There's no reason it would fall apart then.
And the reason that they could potentially fall apart at an inspection is because that's when, you're discovering what's going on with the house. And sometimes there are things that are surprises that are just not obvious. Like when something is very obvious or like known by the seller, if the seller knows that there's an issue, they're responsible for disclosing it. But sometimes there's, an issue they really didn't know about. And usually it's minor and it's not a big deal. And it's like, sure, put it on the list. We'll, a buyer will get that taken care of at some later point, and it's not a big deal. But occasionally there are, major issues discovered, like maybe a roof that is new, but it was done very poorly and will still need to be replaced, or like a major foundational issue, like things that are not obvious when you're looking at a house and doing a showing and falling in love with it, but the inspector finds it out or like discovers evidence and has, refers you to a secondary follow-up. But so like, that's one of the, the ways that it could fall apart. It's not like for nothing though.
Well, and it also is like, just, again, like all these things just have a numeric value always, so it's like, if you find out that there's a new roof, but it's been done poorly. So, and the inspector says, okay, we'll get some estimates to replace it. So the estimates are $18,000. If you as the buyer, if the seller's willing to pay that $18,000 cost, that should be like of zero importance to you, especially if they could get it done beforehand, because you're at the same place. If the seller says, screw you, it's it's a seller's market. Now, all of a sudden you're like, is this house worth $18,000 more to me? Which it may be. But it just becomes, it's like, really, I think that the best way to look at it is like almost everything is actually fixable. It's just a financial question.
Yeah. Very few problems that are like just, so bad that you would not want anything to do with the house after that.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's like, once it's fixed, now you have a new roof.
It's even better. Right. Exactly. So, so somebody, Jana, wrote about the role of the buyer's attorney in this. And that is, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of states actually don't use attorneys for this. And we do, which is.
Can't imagine not.
Well, I can. They don't as much in Columbia County. No, I love the attorneys we work with, but it's just like you're really rolling the dice depending on like how the attorneys work together, and it is like, I just feel like often it is the same boilerplate contract, and you could hire an attorney if something unusual happened. But in our case, everybody hires an attorney, both sides hire attorneys, and it's usually a flat fee. It's like $1,000 to $1,200, something like that. So, and somebody asked if the inspection fee was based on the price of the house, but it's not the price of the house, but it is sometimes the size of the house. So if they're like looking at a 4,000 square foot home that's 10 bedrooms, they'll charge more than a 500 square foot home, so that, I mean, that makes sense. But the attorney is there the buyer's attorney will read the seller's attorney sends them, put their stamp on it, make sure that you understand it, make sure you understand every part of the process. And they're the ones that order the title search. So they work, and again, this is something that you have every right to like pick your title company. But in our area, the custom is that your attorney will be the one to advise you on that. And they just sort of order one. They have relationship with different title companies. And that's the thing that Billy also said, you can ask your attorney to order that early. So you don't have to wait till contract for that. And title is the other thing that is taking between, I mean, it's usually the title or the appraisal that are the last thing that happens. So you're waiting for both of them like 6 to 8 to 9 weeks into the process. So these are happening like parallel. And it depends, the title search depends on the town, like how like forthcoming they are. And if they have like a lot of our towns, if it's like Betty's at the, working in the office, like from 9 to 11 every Thursday and trying to deal with all these requests, it like,
It's
it
part
takes
of
a
the charm of a small town,
part of it's part of, you have to just like release yourself into upstate time, it's just like, I have no control over this. And there is you actually do have some control over things. And there are ways like, so we have our transaction coordinators check in with the bank about when first step is, has the appraisal been ordered? Has an appraiser been assigned? Has the assigned appraiser reached out to somebody to look at the house to schedule a visit? Have they completed that visit? Have they submitted the report? Has the bank's underwriting department approved that report? And then like, do we know what the number is? At each of these stages, things can slow down. Like
And this is all stuff that we are taking care of for our clients. Like
yes.
the client doesn't have to worry about this. Like we have the team to do that. But that's all the stuff that has to take place.
Yeah. And the attorney doesn't have anything to do with that. So that's one thing that's good to know is like the attorney, like that is like, you'll have a person at the bank that's going to be your main point of contact, who's also the person that's our main point of contact at your bank. And you'll be able to be like, hey, what's going on with the appraiser? And we will ask our clients occasionally to like, we'll be like, hey, we've been nagging at them for a while. Can you like call them? And because you're the client, can you call them and put some pressure on? And we'll let you know when we need you to help throw in some elbows for us. So, or for yourself, I guess, technically, but, and sometimes the appraisal comes, and I know it sounds weird, but it's like, and each of these, like, this is where the timeline gets weird. It becomes very opaque because we don't know. We had an appraiser that was assigned for a house recently that now it's been over 3 weeks and he hasn't scheduled an appointment to see it. It's 3 weeks, he hasn't even seen it, so it's like, so now I had to ask the clients to call the bank because we've called a million times and the bank is like, okay, we're going to try and find a new appraiser. It could be that they go and they see it right away and then take 4 weeks to submit their report. Like stuff is so weird. And sometimes they submit the report the same day. There's no way to really track it. So we just try and know where it is and like nudge.
Yeah. And we had an example of a house that the clients were using a national bank and it was like a month and they couldn't get an appraiser. They finally decided to switch to a local bank. And then it was like a week or two later, they got the appraiser and the appraisal. Yeah.
It's a weird situation. So the title search is really the same way. It's like, it's just sort of like happening. And the thing that's, I think that's really hard about this part of the process from contract to close is that it's like nothing happens for a long time and you kind of get like no information. Like we're getting daily updates from the transaction coordinators on our team, even if the update is called the bank, like didn't hear anything, like they don't know, we'll call back in 2 days. So we're following that, but there's literally no information to give you. And then the last bit of the timeline, everything accelerates again. And that's when we get to near the closing period. So actually we should have started this and said it in the middle and said it again and said it again, that there is an estimated closing date in your offer and in the contract. And that means very little. That's literally just a date that they're like, I don't know, this looks like this could be about this time. So we have people like when they get close to that date where they're like, yay, we're almost at the 12th. We booked our plane tickets or whatever. And we're like, whoa. The attorneys will not discuss your actual closing date until you're 100% clear to close. What that means practically, the title has to be in, the appraisal has to be in, any last conditions with the bank have to be cleared. So they sometimes have to do a last minute employment check. They call and be like, this person still have a job. So what that means is you often have like a week from the moment you get cleared to close to closing. So you don't have time to like plan in advance or pack your stuff or hire a moving company. You just like, and I know that even though you're hearing this, if you work with us, like starting in about 3 weeks up to that date that's in your calendar that's called like estimated closing date, you're going to be calling us every day, be like, yo, Billy, Megan, John, Kay, like, do we have a date? And we'll be like, nope, you're not clear to close. The attorneys won't even talk about it. And then your like brain will like panic. And 2 days later, you'll call us and be like, oh, hey, like we want to book a mover. Like, what about just like maybe an estimated date? And we'll be like, nope, the attorneys literally won't even talk about it until we have clear to close. And they do not give a rat's ass about us at that point in the process. Like we have like zero influence on the closing date and we are like of zero importance. And honestly, you as buyers are like just above us as the agents, funnily enough. It's like the attorney, the buyer's attorney, the seller's attorney, the bank's attorney, which is usually one of them, represents both, and the title company have to get in a room together. So if those people can get in a room together, they usually just tell the buyers and the sellers, okay, like January 15th, 3 p.m., is it good for you? Unless you're like planning on dying that day, like let's make it work. And then once everybody's done, they just tell us. They're not, well, and also we don't even go to closing anymore. So actually at this point,
COVID, yeah.
because
And it's in your best interest to not postpone that, because as you just mentioned, like as a buyer, it's in your best interest to not ask for some other date, because think of how many schedules you just mentioned that you have to try to coordinate all on the same day, like that they're all, so when they can finally do that, you just want to make sure you're there,
And I think the thing to keep in mind that's helpful is that this is not just like all of this like busyness, and the fact that everybody is so busy is not just being driven by new sales, but there's a ton of refinancing happening. So the interest rates are so low. So the banks are doing a ton of refis. And so that's using up the same thing, the closing table, the title companies, the appraisers, all those same people are involved. So it's like not just like everybody's busy doing like our business, but it's also just refinances. So essentially, yeah, you get to this period where like nothing's happening. And actually, if you don't hear anything about the title search, that's good, because that means they're not finding anything bad.
And I don't think it's very common that they do, but it's just that just in case you really need to make sure, because it would be a major problem if there was.
Well, and I think it's pretty common that they find something small that's easily remedied, like you never close out your permit on the garage you built or something, or what, like something like that then you just go back to the town, they close it out. So those kind of things, like they happen. And as they find those out, then they will get back to your attorneys. I'm like, who is doing what at this point? Yes. Your attorney will be the one, the title company will tell your attorney, who will tell you. And then they'll also talk to us about if there's anything that needs to be negotiated. Usually it's not a thing that the agents, because the agents now, our role is to kind of support you through this process. We don't really get involved anymore, like in a super substantive way, unless something has to be renegotiated. And even then, it's like often by the time you get to this point, it can be better to have the attorneys help you with that. So our role from this point, is to make sure that like you have everything you need, that when you move into that house, your internet's hooked up, you got your electricity. And we do that like maybe 3 weeks before. That's the next part of the timeline. 3 weeks before we guess you're going to close, we start to get those like vendor information from the sellers and give that to you, so you can start like set up your account with the trash service and do all that stuff, so that when you move into the house, it's as seamless as.
Make sure you have internet the day that you're going to be moving in, because if you might need it for work or whatnot.
Yeah, and then basically, so the only other timeline thing is there's something called the trade requirements, which is truth in lending. No, I don't. Whatever, doesn't matter. Anyways, point of the story is that one of the last things that happens is that the bank has to give you, if you're getting financing, the bank will give you the estimated closing costs, the closing statement. They have to give that to you 3 business days in advance of closing. That's a federal law. So you can like if you haven't gotten that, then you're not closing tomorrow. You can always calculate, like until you get that piece of paper, you're still 3 business days away from it. So that's one of the last things that happens. I mean, they'll give you that same thing at the very beginning, but the last one that they give you is like, you pay for things like when they know the exact closing date, like, so they know that it's going to be like December 15th, then they calculate the amount of taxes that the owners paid for the rest of the year. So that like, so they put those exact numbers in and then hand that to you. So you know everything that's going to happen 3 days in advance of closing. Yeah, we could send a recorded version of this, and we might even, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And I think that, yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot, but this is like, so basically, I guess the last part of the timeline is the walkthrough. So do you usually do the walkthroughs the same day, or I know you did one recently a couple days in advance?
We kind of recommend like within 48 hours of your closing, you basically go to the house for a final walkthrough, kind of just really look at every little thing to make sure it's in the state that you expect it to be in. Any, maintenance repairs were taken care of. And just, check the appliances are working. None of the faucets are leaking, doors and windows are opening and closing. It's, we generally do it the same day, but again, it's like as close to closing as possible, usually same day, but at least maybe within 48 hours is still sufficient.
And the goal is to make sure that like the house, like really is to make sure the house hasn't like burned down, you know what I mean? Or develop like some weird like bat problem or something between the time that you did the inspection and the time that you're closing. So this is not like a negotiation moment where you're like, ooh, like this doorknob feels weird. Like, let's ask for $500. Like, no, like you're like, hey, I turned on the faucet and like the water exploded into my face. Like that's reasonable. And that's usually handled at the closing table where you're like, okay, we want $300 to call, a plumber and to do this, or we'll put $500 in escrow. Like they'll keep, usually not for $500, but let's say it was a bigger problem. Let's put $10,000 in escrow. That money doesn't get paid out to the sellers until you're able to fix something, or they're able to fix something that you find at the walkthrough. And then if it's an $8,000 cost, the seller gets back $2,000. So we handle it.
Question. That buyers saw a listing that said a buyer must be able to close within 60 days of the offer, and they were wondering if that's something that they should probably avoid, especially if they're financing.
That's just just be like, yeah, I'm ready to close.
Yeah,
sure.
But it kind of it goes to
like, what are you gonna do? Like, you're ready. Like, it's not your fault.
Yeah, I mean,
like there literally is nothing they can do. Like if you I don't know. I mean, unless if they say like we need cash, that's cash. You could say that what Billy said before. We're gonna order title right away. We're gonna order appraisal right away. We're gonna do some things. We're gonna get the inspection done right away. What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I think a lot of times it's like wishful thinking that it's like, oh yeah, we want to close in 60 days. And unless they're saying they want a cash offer only, I don't think you have to worry too much about that. But again, as we've kind of been, reiterating over and over again during this talk, is that even in a best case scenario with you doing everything in your power to make things happen smoothly and quickly, it's still probably going to take 3 months. So that's,
what's weird? That Decker, that house in Glens Bay, that one closed in like 6 weeks with financing. And I have no idea what happened, but it was like this weird thing where like the appraiser came out like 2 days after the accepted offer, and then the title was in right away. But that was a real fluke.
That's when the stars are just aligning, and it's
maybe it was 2 months. I don't think it was 6 weeks, but it was like way quicker than usual. So yeah, so that's. And then, I guess the last thing to mention is that after closing, so for us, like we think it's really important to stay in touch with everyone, because after closing, you're going to just know also you're going to have freak out at different points in this process. And you're going to think like, this was a terrible idea. You're going to think we're the dumbest people you ever met. You're going to think your attorney is the dumbest person you ever met. Like you're going to have a cousin who tells you this is a terrible idea. That is a normal part of the process. Like, so we're just here to like, be like, just to like help you get through that. Cause if you do not feel that, then you're an unusual buyer, so that these moments of like questioning it all is like totally normal part of the process. I cried after my closing the whole way driving from closing to our house in Kerhonkson. I was like, what do we do? This is like horrible. Like I had this like, yay. And then I just like cried. We turned off of 209 and I was like, what did I do? I love our house. I'm super happy here. So we're here for you guys also after closing. So that's important, that the timeline for us doesn't end at the closing table, that we're developing stuff around community. We have a full-time concierge buddy who can like help with like, if you need to have a party or need to like find a roofer, like the idea is that like, we're trying to, as much as possible, be able to use our networks and help buyers really settle in and do whatever they need to do, whether it's maybe renting out their house occasionally or fixing something or whatever.
Yeah, and just remain, staying as a resource for our clients, even after the transaction is completed, and just being able to provide what we can.
Yeah. So any last questions from anyone? Oh, down payment. So the down payment is, I mean, this gets into a little bit of a bigger question about appraisal possibly, but standard down payment is 20%. And you usually pay half of it at the contract signing, or somewhere between like 5 to 10% at contract signing.
And then the rest at closing.
And the rest at closing. Yeah. It just gets like rolled into the money that you owe. There are like, this is a longer topic, but if, the only reason a seller cares about the down payment is if they're worried about the appraisal, which a lot of them are here. But we've seen people who are say, look, we're going to only put 10% down, but we have some extra cash to cover a low appraisal. And the seller they don't care then, it's like, if they're qualified, it doesn't matter. That's something to talk to both the bank and the buyer's agent about. Anything else, Billy? Any last thoughts?
We got it. I think that was good. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions, but thanks for joining, everybody.
And if you seriously know like one person upstate with a house, like tell them that we want to list their house. We want to list it now. We are so desperate for listings in this market. Like, please, God, like if like if your friend, your cousin, you go to the vet, like you come up here for a weekend, go to Mohonk Mountain House, like ask the person who's giving you your like chicken fricassee, like please help us get listings. Like we cannot have enough to, awesome, cool listings, obviously, or like cool for their price listings. That's what we want, cool for their price listings. So yes, we will definitely send the recording to everybody. I think we'll probably put it up on IGTV or YouTube also, but yeah, maybe we'll see some of you next Wednesday. Thursday. Oh my God. Thursday. Jen's face. Jen, look, I caught myself. Oh, how can we get on our waiting list? Jen, you want to type that there? Oh no, it's in my Instagram profile, but you can, it's just upstateme.wait/waitlist, right? Upstate, but it's on my in the Instagram, the link in profile, but we can send it also along with the recording. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. So nice to see you here.
Thank you so much.
Billy. Good to see you too. Obviously, always.
Bye, Megan. Bye, everyone.
Bye.